Hi.
Hi.
How are you? It's Sunday again. God's got a word for us today, and the title of the message is Words About Sin and Death. I've been praying off and on all week, and even earlier off and on, and I had to keep coming back to foundational things that we all should know, but we all seem to forget. Things that we all deal with, but just need reminders every once in a while. Some of the things that we have to deal with on a day-to-day basis have everything to do with the trials we face concerning sin and death. Romans chapter 5 and verse 12 discusses a little bit about original sin. It says, "Therefore, just as sin entered the world through one man, and death through sin, and in this way death came to all men, because all sinned." When Adam and Eve first sinned, way at the beginning of time, that sin that Adam created and then Eve followed suit, because they were made perfect and then sinned, they were enticed and sinned. That sin nature became part of the human race from that point on. We are all born into that original sin, and there's nothing that we can do about it. We as human beings are born into sin. It is part of the things that we have to deal with. So it's a part of all of our lives. We all have to deal with it. Romans chapter 6 and verse 23 talks about what the cost of sin is. It says, "For the wages of sin is death." Also in 1 Corinthians chapter 15 and verse 56, it says, "The sting of death is sin, and the power of sin is the law." So between sin causing death and the power of sin being the law that was given, the law was not sinful. The law was perfect. But all the law did was point out the things that would cause us to sin. And in so doing, it made us more aware of the things that God considers sin. So we all have to face these things. We all have to deal with the fact that we are all sinners and that we all will die. And unless, I'll get to that in a minute. We all have a price to pay for sin. But what causes the sin? The book of James in chapter 1 verses 13 to 15 says, "When tempted, no one should say, 'God is tempting me.' For God cannot be tempted by evil, nor does he tempt anyone. But each one is tempted when by his own evil desire," that's that sin nature, "he is dragged away and enticed. Then after desire has conceived, it gives birth to sin, and sin, when it is full grown, gives birth to death." It is the temptations and the trials that we face day by day that cause us to get into sin. That sin nature is there, but we don't necessarily have to sin. Well, we will all fall, we will all sin, we all have, the Bible says we are all sinners. For all have sinned and come short of the glory of God, the Bible says. We all have to deal with this. We all have to deal with the fact that every time that we are led away and enticed, something whispers in our ear, "Go ahead, it's okay, go ahead, go ahead, it's not going to be a problem, don't worry about it." It's all stuff we have to deal with. Everything that we face, everything that we come up against is leading us toward a battle with sin. every day that we walk, every day, everything that we go through is nothing but a battle against sin and death. Okay, so what's the answer? We've got this incredible sin nature that's working in us through no fault of our own. We were born with it. It's something we have to deal with. We were all born with it. Everyone, because of the original sin of Adam and Eve, we are all born with it. So what do we do to deal with it? Well, if you keep reading in Romans, let's go back to the first one. I'll read Romans 5:12 again. Therefore, just as sin entered the world through one man, and death through sin, and in this way death came to all men because all sinned. If you skip down to verse 17 in Romans chapter 5, it says, For if by the trespass of the one man death reigned through that one man, how much more will those who receive God's abundant provision of grace and the gift of righteousness reign through life through that one man, Jesus Christ? Consequently, just as the result of one trespass was condemnation for all men, so also the result of one act of righteousness was justification that brings life for all men. That's your answer. It is what Christ did at the cross. It all boils down to that one thing that Christ did, leading a perfect life and laid his life down, being crucified and died on that cross. He gave up his life. His death was a sacrificial death. It was not a murder. It was not a suicide. It was a sacrifice. He laid down his life. He said, no one takes my life. I lay it down. He laid down his life for us. That one righteous man, that one righteous life that Jesus Christ lived, and he laid down his life, that one act of righteousness was the reason that we can stand before God justified, as if we had no sin at all.